Welcome back to another episode of What's Up with Nick and Chuck. I'm Andy, the marketing guy from HUI, and this week we're going to continue our conversation with industrial designers, as today we brought in Chevis Watkinson to talk to us about the human factor in industrial design. So with that, I'll send you to Nick and Chuck.
Hello everyone, thank you today for joining us on another episode of What's Up with Nick and Chuck.
We're excited to continue our series on industrial design, and this week we have Chevis joining us, and we are going to be focusing our conversation today on human factors. And along with us today we also have Mark Collins, works very closely with the ID folks that we work with, and so today we want to spend most of our time talking about human factors. So Chevis, if you could you explain to us or talk to us about, or maybe even just define human factors and what does that mean in the industrial design world?
So if we talk about user experience, human factors is one of the foundational pillars of that. And basically what it comes down to is an understanding of how the body works and kinesiology. It is to ensure that as the individual uses the product, there isn't fatigue or stress on them, and that's whether it be on the manufacturing floor building it or whether it be using the product on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, all right. So in terms of our viewers, right? And if for medical device companies, how do they need to be thinking about human factors specifically to their products?
So really what they have to do is understand who is the user and how is it being used, not how we think it will be used. The best way to do that is talking to the users, doing observational studies, whether it be in the actual environment, doing interviews, having conversations, and designing it for those people.
Mark, in terms of our interactions with customers and clients, especially when we get into development stage, right? And we're in those early discovery and definition phases. How do you bring, where we're capturing data for industrial design, how do you bring that also from an engineering standpoint for human factors?
Well, I think from an engineering standpoint, a lot of times at that stage, depending on the type of cart, a lot of times you end up with a customer that's has a wish list that's pretty long, and so they end up with a lot of components, and a lot of times you end up putting components, trying to fit into it. Everyone wants a smaller and smaller space cart, and they want more and more stuff on it, and so you end up with trying to get everything in there and yet keep things that are used most efficiently in the correct locations. Like, for example, like you might have something really, really heavy, right, that should be near the top, but you want to put it down low just because there's space for it. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times at that beginning stage, we're trying to narrow down on the nice to haves versus the must haves, mm-hmm. so they don't end up with a product that has some bad human factors.
Now Chevis, how do you take some of that information into consideration when you're trying to provide concepts to a customer?
Well, one of the things, like Mark said, is we want to work very closely with the engineers. There are things that we may want to move, and it's a conversation, not only with the customer, but with the engineering and the manufacturing. For example, like he just mentioned, if it's a heavy item and it's going to be used a lot and going to be lifted or pulled out, if it has to be on the bottom, that has a potential to cause fatigue for the individuals, whether it be for their back or having to lift it, which then becomes a user experience and ergonomic issue. So it's really a back and forth conversation of how can we move things around? What are the wants, needs, and desires? How does it affect engineering? Because it's really an ecosystem and it has to tie in with everything.
And this question is for either one of you two. What about when we're doing with ethnographic research? How does that play into both of your roles?
I'll let you go first.
I was actually going to say, this really plays into where he did.
Yeah, well, that's what I was kind of like, yeah. So the ethnography of looking into that, I mean, it's going out, it's studying the environment. It's really seeing how things are being done. A lot of the ER situations where carts are, the space, it's not like on TV. It's a very cramped and tight space. So you want to be there. You want to immerse yourself in it, whether that be you there observing or whether it be interviewing the people who are in it, talking with them, and really just, the best way is to understand the landscape and how that device is going to fit into there. And again, that drives wants, needs, and desires for the industrial designer to understand what is important in that environment. If the cart has to move around a lot within that environment, then wheels, handles, pivoting, those are all things that will become a must-have.
Reminds me of a story where once we had some failures going on with a writing surface, and I was sent out to figure out what was wrong, and
Millennium.
and they were
Right?
yeah
Yep.
they were explaining how they actually use the cart, right? And it wasn't until after I just sat back and watched them through half the day I found out that they take their pill crusher off of the top where they said that they use it, put it onto the writing surface, and then wham, smash their pills, right? And so that was it. Like, that writing surface wasn't used for writing; it was used as an anvil to help smash pills.
Okay.
And that's so. Sometimes you have to. A lot of times people will tell you what they want, but once you actually watch them and not ask them questions, you start to discover how they actually use it.
So how should device manufacturers utilize, contract manufacturers or industrial designers, engineering firms, how should they utilize us in that ethnographic research? Is it after the fact? Are we invited into something? Like what's ideal?
Well, I certainly would be invited in just to professionals or people who use equipment a lot, right? And of course, I've always found that the less questions you do and the more just watching, the better the information. And I can tell you what's wrong with my golf swing, but what I think is wrong with it is probably not what's wrong with it.
Sure.
And really getting into that environment is very important, because people will tell you how the machine is supposed to be used. And some of the customers haven't had the opportunity to see how it actually is used. For example, the pill smashing. I don't think when they designed it that was the intent for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good for the designers, the engineers, and the manufacturing people, if they can, to participate in the views. It's a first-hand experience. When someone recites the information, some of it can get lost. It's always a great idea, if you can, to video record it too, because when you go back, each time you watch it, you may see something different. And the diversity of people in it, the engineers are looking for different things than the designers. Manufacturing and the customers are looking for different things. So that's why you want to have a very strong collaboration.
Okay. So I guess the question I propose to the two of you is, if we can't be on site, maybe for various reasons, and an industrial designer, an engineer can't go on site to do that ethnographic research with the client, what is the best way for medical device companies to provide that information or to get that information to an industrial designer or to an engineer to help us in that development process, to do that human factors and to successfully have that?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
For me, what I like the best is one-on-one interviews. So if you can get an expert in the field who's willing to talk to you on the phone, that's what I like. And I always find that, like, sometimes you do like group meetings and it seems like you come up with this list of these nice to have, or just these are the things that we want. But when you talk to people one-on-one, sometimes you just get more of a feeling of their frustrations with what they currently do, right? And I think they're more likely, you know how it is, it's just that it's more of a less professional and be a nice place to charge my iPad type thing, which actually is pretty important. Like it changes the experience of the cart. So for me, I like lots of pictures and the opportunity to interview one-on-one.
Yeah, so very much similar. One of the things I suggest always is, when formulating the questions that you're going to be asking, Really get the input from the engineers and the industrial designers, because they may have a different understanding. But document everything. If you can record the information, audio or videotape, that's great, because hearing the voice and hearing or seeing how people talk, and when you ask them a question, do you like? And they kind of say, yeah, it's not, I like it. You can gather from that whether they truly do or not. One of the things I always suggest too is when asking questions, ask them what they don't like. People are more ready to tell you what they don't like in an honest opinion, and that helps you to solve some of the problems they may be having to elevate it.
Mm-hmm. So Chevis, I guess a question for you that I have, and I guess for Mark as well, how do you take the various size differences in users into consideration in the development of a product that could be used by multiple people? And then also, how does that pose challenges from an engineering perspective?
So one of the ways that I've done it and I've experienced it is, there is data out there. One of the best things is Henry Dreyfus, The Measure of Man and Females. And what they've done is they've taken a very large sampling and they give you a lot of the information. Average size of hands from the 5 percentile, which is the short individual, all the way to the tall. So you can use a lot of that as a starting point. Again, to understand the ergonomics and that, you have to see who the users are. There's no sense in designing for the 6'2" person if the average people using it are 5'5" and under. And it's finding that balance and understanding how many people are going to use it, how many different people. And really there's no substitute for getting a prototype, putting it in their hands, and seeing how that works. Now, before I hand it off to Mark, sometimes the problem with that is if you're designing it or it has to be engineered, it does have to be a certain way. So, like most design, you're not going to make it fit for 110% of the population.
So one of the tools that we use is we use that information as a solid model. So a lot of times we'll have a cart or a sketch that's been put into CAD, and then we'll just drop in a 50 percentile North American male or female, and right away that just gives you perspective on whether or not it's sized right. We've had many examples of carts that after designing it, we knew that we needed to show them the scale, right? And how do you do that, right? The 50 percentile person works well, but also just printing out a full scale front view of it, roll it up, tell them to put it up on the wall, and sometimes you tell them to put it in front of the door, and they realize that you can't wheel it in and out of doors, right? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes it's so big that you do a top view and you tell them to lay it down on the floor, roll your existing cart over the top of it, and you'll get a sense for how much bigger this cart is, and we need to start eliminating some of the things that you want on the cart.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
And another question that we asked as well is, what was the favorite thing, if there's something that stands out to you, what was your favorite project that you worked on, or what are the favorite projects that you enjoy working on?
I'll have to go with type of projects. That's a lot easier than narrowing it down to
one particular
one, because they all kind of. Yeah.
Okay, what's your favorite type of project?
Human interaction. That user experience, that exciting, that delighting, that enjoyment out of the product, which ergonomics, form, function, it all ties together, and just making people's lives easier when they use those products. Mm-hmm. It's just that satisfying.
We actually heard that from Julia.
Yeah.
She talked the exact same thing, so.
Yeah, it's, for a lot of designers, that's our passion. That's, I always say, when they say, what's your favorite thing to design? And I say anything, because I love applying what I know to design, whether it be a child's toy, whether it be the new closet for my wife, or whether it be automotive and medical.
And you've been working and teaching for a long time now. If you could go back to the beginning of your career, is there anything different that you would have either chosen to do or would do different?
No, I don't think so, to be honest with you. I've been extremely lucky. I never knew about industrial design. I was going to go to school for graphic design. In my first year of college, I got introduced to industrial design, and it was the blend of art and engineering and building Legos and painting pictures. And I've been lucky through my 20 years of career that I've gotten to work with engineers, accountants, salespeople, marketing people, and just work on a variety of products, and it's fun and it's been a passion. And that passion is actually my passion outside of work as well.
What advice would you give a first-year industrial design student?
Identify the problem. Make sure that what you're designing or what you're solving for is a real problem, that there's a need from the consumer, the customer, or the user. And it's not the problem that you think is there or three of your friends think. It's what is the user. And always design in a collaboration, not in a bubble, because through the entire process, when you collaborate, your end product is always going to be better because it takes in so many different facets.
Here's a tough question. As an industrial designer, how do designers get a feel for what they're designing, what the cost will be of what they're designing?
Oh, that is something that, yeah, I wish they had taught me that in school. It's the age-old thing. When you graduate, you've got enough knowledge to get a job, and then you start learning. The best way that I've learned and been taught is working with the engineers, because they are very detailed oriented. They have the knowledge of not only what is the raw material going to cost, what is the manufacturing process going to cost, what is the mechanism, if you're buying off the shelf parts, what is the profit that needs to be made, what does the customer need to make, and learning that, whether it be about plastic, the engineers are taught that. You know, well, how much does a slide cost? How much does a lifter cost? If you reduce the tube size just by a little and get something that is stock, you're saving money. And again, you know, there's a famous quote from a designer where they talk about a sweet curve, and it's Raymond Loewy. And someone asked him, what does a sweet curve look like? And his response was, the mark on the profit chart going up. So if you're not working with these people to learn it and you're not keeping that in mind, you can end up with a beautiful cart that no one can make money on.
Yeah, yeah.
You've been working for 20 years. Tell us about your career history.
Yeah, so actually I'm from Canada, moved to the States, and I had the opportunity to work for a very diverse group of companies, anything from automotive, housewares, and medical. Through that, I've worked with corporate, I've worked with consultancy, I've had my own, and I currently have my own consultancy firm. That knowledge, every different one has done it a little bit differently, but that knowledge that I've gained from all the different industries and the techniques I've been able to accumulate so that I can apply that to whatever I'm designing and working on, whether it be helping with the engineering or talking with them and understanding what they need, to marketing, to sales, styling, and a variety of areas.
In the past 20 years of your career, do you have any stories, either good or bad, that stick out as far as human factor disasters or?
Yeah, so there was a project where the client did not want to do prototyping. Things on the screen looked great, CAD looked great. They decided that they wanted to go to production tooling right away. And the logic was they wanted to save $10,000 in the prototyping fees and doing some ergonomic studies and just making sure that everything fit. In the end, they had to scrap probably about $10,000 worth of tooling because they couldn't make the changes with water lines and all that in there. And, you know, their own admission was, yeah, we should have spent the money to do the study and to do the prototyping to test.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think 20 years ago, I went to I think it was in John Deere. They had a VR lab, which was pretty sophisticated, especially for that time.
Yeah.
I always thought that would have caught on more, where it'd be much more mainstream nowadays to actually use virtual reality. Have you seen anybody using it mainstream?
So yeah, I've seen some of the larger firms start using it. Airlines, I know a design firm called Teague uses it intimately, where people have to immerse themselves in a larger environment. It is, becoming much more popular for augmented reality, to show people the product so that they can spin it around as a step in between the CAD and doing a prototype, or if you need to reach in and do ergonomics and factors to see how far a handle is away. So it's becoming more popular now that the cost of things are coming down, and the knowledge of how to build these 3D environments has gotten a lot easier with new software.
What's the name of your firm?
It's Chevis Watkinson Design. Just thought I would go with my name. With a name like Chevis, it's a little bit easier to remember.
Sure.
So I've got a website, and you can kind of go to that. It's cwatkinson.design.
And we'll take and have that information at the end of the series with our contact information on the screen, including Chevis as well.
Well, Chevis, thank you very much for joining us this week on our episode. It was great having you, and greatly appreciate the time you've taken to join us today.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching our latest episode of What's Up with Nick and Chuck. If you have any questions for the guys, I'll have all their contact information for you at the end of the video. Also, come back next week as we continue this industrial design conversation, as we bring in more experts from the industry to give you that information. Thanks again for watching. Stay safe and have a great day.